Fall camp intel is continuing to roll right along as we are 10 days away from the college football season. A lot of these teams are set to play in just over 2 weeks. So what's the latest from these different camps? Well, Miami is in a fascinating position because if you remember correctly, Mario Cristobal walks in there and they had 2 different coordinators. They had Kevin Steele, they had Josh Gaddis. Kevin Steele ends up going to Bama. Josh Gaddis, hey, sorry, this isn't really going to work. It's not you, it's me kind of thing. Well, actually, it might be you, but we're not really going to sort that out. So you got 2 coordinators. You got Shannon Dawson calling the offense. You got Lance Guidry calling the defense. Now, offensively, they love where they stand right now. Tyler Van Dyke, going into last season, there was talk about him potentially going pro after last season and being a first-round pick and all the great things he did in 2021. And then he gets dinged up, doesn't have a lot of help around him. The offensive line is kind of lackluster. And they are just flying under the radar right now in Coral Gables, or at the very least, Tyler Van Dyke is. They feel like he is back, is what I was told, talking to people close to that operation. They feel like this system for him is much more playing to his skill set than the last one was. Shannon Dawson kind of doing a power spread offense kind of thing. They're going to do the air raid gets thrown around a lot when you talk about Shannon Dawson. I think it'll be a little bit more balanced than that. I think they'll run the football as well. They think it's going to complement his skill set much more, and they feel like he is going to be, 1, more healthier than last year, and 2, be better protected because of who they have on the offensive line. Javion Cohen, transfer from Alabama. He's going to play for them on the offensive line. They love where they stand at center right now with UCF transfer Matt Lee. They just feel like as a whole, they're in a much better jumping off point because last year they averaged 19 points a game. 19 points a game with a sack rate of 8%. That's one of the worst in the country. So Tyler Van Dyke, 1, the offense wasn't scoring. 2, he wasn't getting protected. So they feel like both those situations have been upgraded from a system and a personnel standpoint on the O-line. They feel much better about where they stand right now. The running back room they're excited about. Mark Fletcher, the freshman, is a name that you hear a lot talking to people close to that program. Ajay Allen is a transfer from Nebraska. He had a really strong scrimmage, had a couple of explosive runs. They like where they stand in that running back room, having a little bit of depth, because last year they didn't really run the football that effectively either. So being able to move the line of scrimmage in the run game and then protect TVD in the pass game, if they can be balanced like Shannon Dawson, I believe, wants to be, there's going to be room for better things to happen in Coral Gables. Defensively, still kind of putting it together. Nigel Kelly is a name that you hear a lot, and from what I was told, he is going to have every opportunity to be that guy on the defensive line for the Miami Hurricanes. They love his skill set. They want to see him go and do it in a game, though. At the safety position, you feel pretty good about where you stand with Cam Kitchens and James Williams. James Williams, I mean, if y'all have seen him play, that is a big human being. He is a thumper in the run game. They're going to allow him to go and play in the box and let him cut it loose a little bit. The overall feeling in Coral Gables is they're going to be much better than last year. Now, what does much better equate to from a wins losses standpoint? Is much better going to be 8-9 wins? Is much better 7 wins? Remains to be seen, but overall, they feel like things are steadily heading in the right direction under Mario Cristobal. And from what I can gather, it feels like last year they were still sort of in the negative in Mario Cristobal's first year, bringing the new staff and all that. This year, yes, just have some new pieces on the staff, but I feel like they think they're more in a neutral standpoint right now when it comes to where they stand right now at Miami. So all in all, good things. Go and get a membership at CaneSport because they're going to keep you in the know. Gary Freeman and company doing a phenomenal job over there. Speaking of a site at On3 with Miami, another site at On3 is VolQuest, and they cover Tennessee better than anybody else. And talked to some folks over there, and they had a rainy scrimmage not too long ago. And so when you have a lot of rain on the field, and from what I was told, the field was essentially like underwater when they took the practice field, that can make for some tricky situations, especially if you have your race horses at the wide receiver position. You don't really want to risk them turning an ankle or taking a funny cut and tweaking a knee. So for the most part, they held a lot of their top guys out. Even so, it sounded like Joe Milton had a really good scrimmage. Wasn't throwing to a lot of the top wide receivers, like I mentioned, but they said he looked solid. We'll talk more about the quarterback room in just a second. The story of the day from that scrimmage, though, was that the defense actually won the day. Now, some of that you say, okay, conditions probably played to their strengths. It's not going to be that easy to throw the ball around the yard when it feels like a medicine ball and it's waterlogged and all that. So that's fair. But I think if you're a Tennessee fan, this is music to your ears that, okay, the defense is starting to throw some punches back at the offense. it's not uncommon for the defense to be a step ahead of the offense at this point in fall camp, because you kind of have to get more things right offensively, assignment-wise, for it all to work together, whereas defensively you can kind of hide some things. And all I'm saying is defensively they like where they're at right now. The secondary is going to be what everybody talks about going into this coming season. Still a little bit of wait and see, right? I mean, you still got to see it in a real game scenario, but they feel like they're at a much better spot just because of the experience they have. I mean, you have guys that have had real in-game experience that are going to play for you again this year. Whereas last year, I don't know if you felt as good about your depth. You got Wesley Walker, who's probably going to start at safety, Jalen McCullough, Danico Slaughter, like guys that have played some real football, some meaningful minutes, to quote Rusty Mansell. They like where they stand right there. They think they're going to be improved. The front seven, they're really excited about. They feel like they are in a place to kind of pick up where they left off last season. Now, back to the offensive side of the ball. The offensive line, when you talk to people close to Tennessee, gets the majority of the buzz. Right now, they have a battle going on at that other tackle position. John Campbell is going to, in all likelihood, hold it down at the left tackle spot, the transfer from Miami. So you had Gerald Mincy and Jeremiah Crawford competing at that position a year ago. Now they're rotating over to the other side of the field, to the other tackle spot, and they're going to battle it out. So that'll be interesting to see where they stand. Still wait and see mode for the left guard spot. And I cannot stress this enough. It is imperative that they have the offensive line position, especially internally, the offensive line unit rather, really set to how they like it. Because Tennessee last year, they were a run-first football team. And y'all that have watched the show for any length of time, you know that. You know how we feel about Tennessee. Yes, Jalen Hyatt had a couple of awesome highlight reel plays. Yes, he put up big numbers. Yes, Hendon Hooker threw it all around the yard. But they were able to do that because of the pressure they put on defenses in the run game. So for this offensive line to have the success they had last year is going to be extremely important, and they're sorting that out right now. Jalen Wright, running back for them, had a good day, said he ran over a guy. According to people that I talked to, I believe there's also a clip out on social media. Always good to see the running backs running hard, especially at this point in fall camp. Like to see him get a little bit of contact courage there, so that's a good sign. The quarterback room is really as advertised so far right now. I mean, Joe Milton is going to be your guy. There's no mistake about it. He is the leader in that locker room. He's the leader of that football team. And right now, he looks the part. Someone that I talked to said from what they've been able to see at open practices, which again is probably routes on air and you're kind of just going through warm-ups and whatnot in Indy, they said they haven't seen a ball touch the ground that he's thrown. So take of that as you will. I think that's a good sign that Joe Milton hasn't had any noticeable hiccups to this point in fall camp. Then Nico, obviously the number one player for us here at On3 this last cycle. You see flashes of that. You see why he was the number one player in the country in 2023. But even so, you also understand, okay, he's a true freshman. So you see the talent, you see the ability, you see the flashes, but you also see, okay, he's still learning an offensive playbook at the collegiate level. He's still getting comfortable in Knoxville. So all in all, it's pretty much what you would expect when it comes to that quarterback room. But from what I can tell at this point, all of those storylines are probably right in line with what you would expect as a Tennessee Volunteer fan based on what's going on right now in Knoxville. Now let's go ahead and show some attention to Kansas State. I had some of y'all get at me on Twitter and say, JD, you only talk about Tennessee, you only talk about Alabama, only talk about Georgia. We're talking about Kansas State right now. And if you want to stay in the know with Kansas State, go get a membership at K-State Online, our Kansas State on 3 site. Kansas State won the Big 12 last year. And everybody's talking about Texas and Oklahoma, and like, that's fine. But Kansas State won the Big 12 last year, and they bring back the quarterback that got it done for them. Now, you lose Deuce Vaughn, so I don't pretend that that's just going to be an easy piece to replace. But they feel really good about Will Howard right now. They love his confidence from a couple of different vantage points. One, just the confidence in what he's seeing on the field. They said he has a better grasp for what he's looking at. When he looks at a defense, it's kind of slowing down for him, it sounds like. On the other side of that, he has the confidence to bounce back from negative plays, and that's enormous for a quarterback, because when I see a turnover or I see a negative play and I'm on the offensive side of the ball, I look right to the quarterback. Hey, quarterback, how do we feel about this? If you're not nervous, I'm not nervous. It's kind of similar to the head coach. You go as that individual goes. And so for Will Howard to kind of have that steady hand right now, kind of taking that next step, it sounds like as a leader, because remember, it was him and Adrian Martinez last year. For him to be the guy this year and for him to be embracing that, Sounds like good news so far for the good people in Manhattan, Kansas. Not New York, Manhattan, Kansas, the Little Apple. We love it. Wide receiver room getting a lot of buzz. Sounds like it's the position group that's really stood out this past fall camp or this fall camp right now. And one individual they love is Keegan Johnson, transfer wide receiver from Iowa. And they just like what he brings to the table from a skill set standpoint, really good speed, getting in and out of breaks. They're excited about him. Also, Phillip Brooks. If you're a K-State fan, you already know about him, but he has just been the epitome of Mr. Consistent, over 500 yards receiving the last 2 seasons. Kansas State hasn't really been a pass-heavy offense. I don't expect that to change. They threw the ball right around 42% of the time last year, which is definitely on the lower end across the country. But even so, keep an eye on how this wide receiver room develops, because the way that they speak about them, Kansas State's going to run the ball, and then maybe they hit you over the top with a pass play. But I think you could also see them sprinkle in a touch more of that pass game with an experienced quarterback like Will Howard and no more Deuce Vaughn. And oh, by the way, you have Colin Klein calling the offense. And Colin Klein, if y'all remember, he was a quarterback at Kansas State. So quarterbacks, hey, like to throw the ball. No shame in that. Defensively, there is a couple of notes there. Uso Seumala. So close. I practiced it a couple times. Uso Seumalo. It's a nose guard. He is 340 pounds, and he is a force in the middle for Kansas State. Colin Klein said he has just been a pain to have to practice against. And to have a big body like that in the middle, in the Big 12, that's going to be extremely important for them. So you're encouraged about the way that he has progressed so far this fall camp. Also, the secondary. Will Lee is a transfer from the community college level from Iowa Western, was one of the top JUCO prospects. And he is right in line with what you would expect with a modern cornerback in college football. Really good length, is about 6'2". As a whole, they just love the length in the secondary altogether. They feel like that's going to make it difficult on opposing offenses to be able to get too many pass windows on them. So K-State, defending Big 12 champs, nobody's really talking about them, but they're rolling right along in fall camp. They like where they stand. Let's go back to the SEC. Ole Miss, and Ole Miss Spirit is where you can keep up with all the intel there when it comes to fall camp. They had a scrimmage, and they feel like the defense won the day. You're noticing a theme here. Defense is winning a lot of the early scrimmages as the offense is still getting through their install, getting through the personnel groupings. That's okay. I wouldn't panic, but I think that's good news if you're keeping track of things at Ole Miss. Pete Golding's defense, remember, is a new DC coming from Alabama, now calling the defense for Lane Kiffin. His strategy is we're going to be aggressive defensively. We're going to make it a priority to stop the run. In the pass game, we're trying to get to the quarterback. We are trying to wreak havoc. We're trying to be disruptive. That is the name of the game for Pete Golding. Sounds like they did that in this scrimmage. From what I heard, they had Quinshon Judkins, who for a lot of people's money is the best running back in the country, held him to 9 yards on 10 carries. I don't think that says a lot about Quinshon Judkins. I think it says more about where this Ole Miss defense is at right now. That's a very encouraging sign. Defensive end Cedric Johnson, 3 tackles, a quarterback sack. He spoke really highly about where the defense is at right now and how they're running things. Created 3 interceptions. Now, the good news for Ole Miss fans across this quarterback room, it wasn't like one guy just had a bad day. You had 1 interception for Austin Simmons, 1 for Spencer Sanders, 1 for Jackson Dart. Jackson Dart, it sounds like right now, running with the 1s. Now, Spencer Sanders getting some run with the 1s and the 2s. I expect Spencer Sanders, it's just my feel, I don't have any intel here. I expect Spencer Sanders to have a role in some way, shape, or form. Too good of an athlete. They want to run the football at Ole Miss, and with what they do in that RPO scheme, I would expect him to have some packages. But it really sounds like Jackson Dart is holding this job down. So we'll keep our ear to the ground there for the intel, but they really like where they stand with that quarterback room from a depth standpoint, if nothing else. Austin Simmons, if you remember correctly, reclassified and then went to Ole Miss, which was a big get for Lane Kiffin. So they got him in that quarterback room along with Walker Howard. But the running back room at Ole Miss, you got Quinshon Judkins, who is a known commodity. You got Ulysses Bentley, it's a little bit dinged up during fall camp. And you got Jam Griffin, the transfer from Oregon State. So they got some depth in this running back room, and that's going to be important for Ole Miss because we've said it a lot on here. They like to pound the rock. That is a priority for them. 48 carries a game in 2022. It's good for top 5 in the country. If you want to run the football at that kind of clip, you got to have some fresh legs to go the length of the season, especially the length of the season in the SEC. So for Ole Miss, I think the story there is the defense and the way they're progressing, and then we'll keep an eye on where things stand in that pecking order with Jackson Dart and Spencer Sanders and the rest of the cast of characters they got in that quarterback room in Oxford. So rolling right along. Fall camp now, again, a couple of these teams are going to, not these teams specifically, but a lot of teams are playing week 0. For the most part, though, these teams will have at least one more scrimmage, and then you're kind of getting down to, okay, where's our depth chart stand? Where are we as a whole? Where, who's going to be the starting quarterback? Who's going to be the starting left guard? Like, you start to kind of sort these things out. So one more scrimmage that we'll get through here, and we'll have a little bit more of a feel for where they stand depth-wise. But overall, man, 10 days till college football. For a lot of these teams, 17 days till they get it rolling. Hey, y'all, thanks so much for watching. Subscribe to the channel here to make sure you don't miss an episode of The Hard Count. Also, be sure to check out other videos on the On3 YouTube channel.